Good morning, Sabah al Khair, ladies and gents. My name is Omar Ansari and I work for the APNIC Foundation as its Digital Leap South Asia project lead. According to ITU, approximately 2.6 billion people worldwide are offline. Most of these individuals reside in the developing world, with South Asia accounting for about 57% of the world's offline population. Nearby in six of the South Asian economies, around 50% of the population lacks internet access. Afghanistan 82%, Pakistan 54%, Bangladesh 55%, Sri Lanka 43%, India 47%, and Nepal 48%. Other regions with significant online population include Nigeria, Indonesia, and China. Asia alone harbors around 1.9 billion offline population, making it the most offline regions globally. Some of our participants seems you can hear us? Okay, now good. APNIC Foundation's Digital Leap South Asia project organizes this session to explore the challenges affecting connectivity in the developing world and explore the actionable strategies. This session aims to address three policy questions. One, how can policymakers adopt regulatory frameworks to promote innovation and investment? Two, what strategies can be implemented to address the digital divide and ensure equitable access to the internet connectivity? Three, how can regional cooperation initiatives be strengthened to foster collaboration among countries in addressing shared challenges in accelerating efforts towards universal internet access? This is a panel discussion, and I'm joined by leaders and experts from across the globe. Mahesh Opal, Director of Comfirst Private Limited. Jimson Ulofeye, Principal Consultant at Contemporary Consulting Limited. Mohammad Sharif, Director of Government and International Relations at Oxia Enterprise. Saeed Mohammad Shahriar Javed, Senior ICT Specialist, Economic Infrastructure at the Islamic Development Bank. Dr. Maria Bibi, Consultant IDG, Asia Open RAN Academy. She's online. And Shannon Osepa, Telecom and Internet Operations and Policy Strategist, who's also online. The panel discussion would be 60 minutes, and it will be organized in three segments. Segment number one, we'll discuss the current state of connectivity and challenges. Segment number two, we'll discuss policy frameworks and regulatory measures. And segment number three, we'll discuss innovative technologies and partnerships. The discussion will be followed by a Q&A session, which will be approximately 30 minutes. And we're interested in taking questions from the audiences. So please make it as interactive and participatory as you can. So let's start with the segment number one, which is about the current state of connectivity and challenges. So I'll come to my distinguished speakers. Mahesh, let's start with you. In the context of South Asia, particularly India, what are the key infrastructure or policy challenges hindering broader internet connectivity and how they can be addressed?
Yeah. Thanks, Omar, and ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to speak to you. We all know that today internet, of course, is central to more or less every aspect of our social as well as economic lives. So it's critical that we understand what the challenges themselves are in terms of internet access. And I think for that, we also need to have a more nuanced look at some of the numbers that we are talking about. And while I'll try and use India as an example, but I suspect the issues are common to most countries, especially in South Asia, but also probably amongst the developing world. Now, and I'm going to talk about three particular aspects. One is the number of users that we are talking about, the nature of usage, and the kind of methods in which people are accessing internet and what the challenges might be. Now, India, for instance, officially claims to have roughly about 1.2 billion phone connections and roughly 950 million internet users. However, I think, like all of us know, that most of this usage is wireless, and wireless users in particular tend to have multiple accounts. So when you actually look at the unique number of users of telephone connections or indeed internet connections, you find that that number probably is roughly about 65% of this larger number. And so the number of unique users is about that. And even there, what we also notice is roughly about 60% of the phone lines and the internet connections are urban, where roughly 35% of the people live, or 30% of the people live, and roughly about 50% of the connections are rural, and there actually more than 70% of the people live. So again, you have a sense of how the distribution of access is. Further, you also see that now you come to the type of usage. For instance, you will also notice that roughly 300 million Indian users out of the 1.2 billion relies still on 2G technologies, 2G phones. So you can also begin to understand that the quality of internet access on a 2G phone is barely functional. So beyond WhatsApp, etc., beyond simple SMSs, there is very little data that you can use in a 2G connection. And much the same thing, a similar message can also be drawn from the kind of usage people have. For example, whether it is WhatsApp, Facebook, YouTube, etc., we have roughly about 500 million, about close to 500 million users. So when you try and imagine a typical internet user who does not use any of these services, you will find that number probably is a very, very negligible small number. So the limited point I'm making is that we haven't really captured the actual the quality or if indeed the intensity of the lack of connectivity in South Asia. So that is something that I'd point out, and we'll come to that. And I'll just mention this is largely because regulators across South Asia have been focused on aggregate numbers rather than unique users. And we'll discuss that further. I hope that.
So that was a very good start. You've touched upon the number of users, the issues that you raised, the nature of usage, and what are the methods of the usage in India and the broader developing world. Jameson, you have a lot of experience of working in Nigeria and the wider African region. And most of it is developing. How do you see the lack of connectivity affecting the socio-economic development in those regions?
Thank you very much, Omar, and greetings, everyone. My name again, Jameson Olufuye. I'm the chair of the Africa ICT Alliance. That is the Advisory Council of the Africa ICT Alliance. It's an alliance of ICT associations, companies, and professionals across Africa, 43 countries in Africa, so to speak. So it's not only in Nigeria, but my spectrum, as you said, covers Africa and also involve play globally. Well, the topic is very, very important. It's really crucial. And when we talk about connectivity, without connectivity, you are not in the digital world. And not just connectivity, just as Mice talk about, meaningful connectivity is very important. Meaningful connectivity such that you can really have something productive to do with it. So in developing world, at least let us have connectivity. Nigeria, for example, we had 75% internet penetration, and that even got reduced last 2 months to about 61% because there was a requirement for NIN, National Identity Card number, National ID number, to be ported to the phone number. So those that are not ported, they were cut off. So that is to agree with you that around 61% is the actual people. Okay, but these are in the cities, okay, basically. So to reach the interior, we need to use, because interior is a challenge, getting to the connectivity to the interior. There is this fund called Universal Service Provision Fund. It has not been used very well. Even at the session, that was the last session I attended, where a panel, didn't even know that there is a Universal Service Provision Fund by ITU. So we need to talk more about that and how regulators are using that fund. So stakeholders within their countries, they need to engage the regulators and find out how it is being used to subsidize reach into the underserved areas. And lastly, I did a report on behalf of UNECA, United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, and that report showed that a 10% increase in internet penetration yield up to 8.2% increase in GDP per capita. So that is an incentive to government to take this thing very seriously. Thank you very much.
And that was very good in a point that was new as well, like the relation of internet connectivity to GDP increase. That's very interesting. Sharif, you worked as Minister of Communications. You were in the government and now in the private sector in Maldives. How are the island economies addressing the challenges, especially Maldives and other geographically unique economies? And how do you see, what are your advice and good practices that could be utilized?
Thank you. Well, let me start by thanking Ethnic Foundation for inviting us to share our perspective as well. As Omar pointed out, I am from the island context, the small island developing states, we call ourselves SIDS, but in reality, we are a large ocean country. If you take Maldives, for example, the country is as big as some European countries, but the landmass is only less than 1%. So our challenge is how do you connect hundreds and hundreds of islands, small islands, across hundreds and hundreds of kilometers of ocean. And I will give you the answer because I only have 2 minutes. So the answer is prioritizing connectivity, prioritizing bandwidth, right? As developing countries, we have many needs, but we have few resources. And often we say, okay, we got poverty, we've got health issues, we got education, we got no money for connectivity infrastructure. But I think today we've got to, if we want to actually tackle poverty, if you want better health, if you want better education, we've got to invest in infra. In Maldives, we've gone from geostationary internet gateway back in 2004 pre-tsunami to today. We have 5 submarine cables landing in the Maldives. and we have a Starlink LEO-based satellite communication, because especially between in 2023, we prioritized just having bandwidth. Thank you.
The bandwidth prioritization, that's one key important issue, and I think many of the countries in our region, in South Asia particularly, when I was in Afghanistan, we had not the bandwidth was not addressing the needs of the country. So one of the solutions could be to bandwidth import in the flow, and that will really affect the cost and the quality of services, and more people will connect. Thank you very much, Sharif. Let's take some views from our online participants. Maria, from the capacity building perspective in the developing world, what critical skill gaps do you see that's affecting the digital divide, and what could be done to address this?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Thank you,
Here.
Omar. I'm just going to dive right into the critical skill gaps contributing to the digital divide. First is basic digital literacy, which is the lack of foundational digital skills such as using computers, smartphones, or navigating the internet, which limits ability to access information, services, and opportunities online. Another one is advanced technical skills such as programming, cybersecurity, data analytics, and AI, which hinders local innovation and participation in the global digital economy. A third is telecommunications and network infrastructure. Some of you have already discussed that, but skills in network design, management, and maintenance, for example, Open RAN, 5G deployment, they need to be developed in developing regions to speed up digital infrastructure expansion. Fourth, we normally don't think about this, entrepreneurial and business skills, knowledge to leverage digital technologies for entrepreneurship, local businesses, and economic growth. And some of you already talked a little bit about the policy and regulatory considerations. There is a need for technical knowledge to develop and implement effective digital policies, because policies that are not effective hinder equitable access and innovation. And there's language barriers. Limited proficiency in global languages can restrict access to online content, training, and collaboration opportunities. A couple more: teacher training in digital education. Educators often lack the skills to integrate digital tools into their teaching and learning, and they perpetuate a cycle of low digital literacy. Finally, of course, cultural and gender barriers, where women and marginalized groups have less access to digital skills training, perpetuating existing and inequities. I think the other half of my question is to strategies to bridge skill gaps. I think I shall leave that for the question and answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Disparities in the internet access do you observe? And how do these disparities...
We lost you, Omar.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Maria? Shannon, can you hear me? Can you hear me now? All right, so until our technical colleagues connect online speakers again, I'll go to Shahriar. Shahriar, given your experience with the Islamic Development Bank, supporting major infrastructure and connectivity programs, as well as the economic development, projects across the developing world, especially the ISDB member countries. How do you see, what are the major infrastructure in funding barriers that prevent widespread connectivity across the developing world, and especially the ISDB member countries?
Thank you very much, Umar. I hope I'm heard well. Um, First of all, of course, this is a great opportunity for us as Islamic Development Bank to share our experience at this forum. It's probably the first time that we are participating in IGF. And just for the sake of the majority of the audience, Islamic Development Bank is a multilateral development bank with a South-South cooperation model. We have 57 member states across Asia, Africa, Middle East, and Latin America. And coming back to the question, of course, we have had our primary mandate is to support and provide the enabling digital infrastructure in our member states that would facilitate the government to provide further DPI, digital public infrastructure services to its citizens, and also enable private sector to come in to provide the last mile solutions. And what the challenges that we have seen in coming and assisting our member states is lack of bankable documents, lack of prioritization, which was just mentioned by Mr. Sharif before me, the lack of understanding of what new emerging technologies can provide as an assistance to provide and bridge the digital gap. We have actually, some of the examples that we have done is enabling submarine cable infrastructure in Southeast Asia, in Bangladesh. We have done some submarine cable projects in Africa, in Djibouti. We've done fiber optic backbone programs in West Africa, in Sierra Leone, and the Gambia. So we do have financed a good number of projects and working closely with other MDBs like African Development Bank, the World Bank, and of course we are now working on developing certain programs in the Arab and African states in partnership with UNDP, with ITU. But what we have really realized is the lack of capacity, the institutional capacity in terms of master plan in order to bridge the digital divide in the country, and also, of course, lack of proper feasibility studies of large-scale infrastructure projects that we have realized is the main bottleneck that we believe that is resisting in terms of bridging the digital divide in our member states. So probably I'll stop here, and of course, I'll happy to share more examples later on.
Shahriar, so lack of bankable documentation, lack of prioritization, lack of institutional capacity to do all these is a major challenge that Shahriar touched upon. Do we have Shannon online? Okay.
Yes.
You
Yes,
can
I am.
hear me? All right.
Yes, I can.
Shannon,
I can.
thank you very much, and sorry for the technical issues. In the Caribbean context, what disparities in the internet access do you observe, and how these disparities influence regional development priorities?
Yes. First of all, I would like to thank you, Omar, as well, for the invitation. I'm a strategic advisor with the Caribbean Telecommunication Union, so we have been observing several challenges within the Caribbean. First, the Caribbean is very diverse. When we talk about the Caribbean, sometimes people think it's a country, but we have a lot of islands and countries in the Caribbean, and each one of them are different. If we look, we do have, for example, two big extremes. If we look, for example, at the poorest country in this Western Hemisphere, which is Haiti, its internet penetration is approximately 39%. And when we look at countries within the Caribbean, the Bahamas, Barbados, and others, which higher GDPs, their internet penetration is more than 80%. So we are seeing big disparities in the Caribbean. And this is also true when we look at the technologies being used. Mostly in the Caribbean, we are using mobile technologies, 3G and 4G, mostly 4G. And nowadays, there are some discussions and pilots ongoing with respect to 5G. but we haven't seen a big, let's say, case for 5G as yet. So when we look at the challenges, we have some economic barriers. For example, very high government fees. The Caribbean is also part of the SIDS, Small Island Development States. So they have some very unique challenges. We see high government fees, taxes, dominance of over-the-top um, providers, which especially telecoms operators are saying they are not receiving enough revenue based on all these online, based on all these over-the-top services being provided. When we look at the infrastructure itself, it has some challenges, as I did mention. It depends which country you're looking at. Some are very well developed, some are less developed. And one other very important issue that that we're focusing right now in the Caribbean is what we call the subsea cables. As you know, all the internet traffic is being transported over the subsea cables. And what we have in the Caribbean is quite old. Most of these cables are reaching their end of life um, period. So we need to find ways how to, if we would like to continue for the development to continue, to see how we can enhance all these subsea cables. So this is very high level. Maybe later on in the questions and answers, I'll make a more deep dive. But for now, this is very high level what we're seeing in the Caribbean. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hernan. You've also touched upon the correlation of GDP with connectivity. Earlier, Jimson said that the higher the connectivity, the higher the GDP. So it enhances GDP if more people are connected. So it means connectivity should be prioritized so that enhance the GDP. In terms of the over-the-top operators in the ARPU, when I was in Afghanistan, the operators would complain that our ARPU is very low because there were complaints about the price of internet. And when I did a little calculation, the ARPU of the Afghan operators were higher than India and Pakistan. So there was much higher, and there were times it was like extremely high when the NATO forces were still in Afghanistan. But they kept the price really, really unaffordable for the Afghan population. And you see around 80% of the country is still offline. So these are some of the challenges that we need to identify and address. So with this, we're done with our first segment, but I'm happy to take one comment or question from the floor before we open the second segment of our conversation. Is there anybody who would like to share an opinion or a question? So the gentleman will take one, and then in the next segment we'll take another one. So perhaps we could take you next. So please keep it brief at 1 minute, so we can. Yeah, there will be a Q&A later as well.
Hello everyone, this is Ajmal Amiri. I have a suggestion and request. We have a big cyber awareness. We have a big challenge in cyber awareness. Most of the people who are educated or uneducated, they are using internet without knowing the threat of cyber attacks and how to use internet in safe manner. So it will be better to have a plan and awareness program, cyber attacks, Afghanistan, and then in the same in the other countries.
So cyber attacks, how we can secure our infrastructure and how we can protect our populations from the cyber attacks. Who would like to comment on that? Okay, so a quick one from Sharif and then Jimson.
I think the point that's been raised is extremely important. As we are trying to connect everybody, we have to understand that what are the dangers for individuals in the cyberspace, and we have to put in national programs in place to make everyone as a contributor to a safer digital space nationally and globally. So yeah, cyber awareness should be a national strategy and program. Thank you.
Yes, indeed, very important question. I just want to highlight that because of this importance, the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa actually commissioned that report, and that report I mentioned on internet penetration connection to GDP also talks about cybersecurity maturity connection to GDP. A 10% increase in maturity, cybersecurity maturity, will yield around 5.4% increase in GDP per capita. So that is to underscore the fact that government need to take cybersecurity maturity very seriously to build trust in the internet. And lastly on this, we built a framework for organization, for enterprises, for countries to assess themselves on that is maturity assessment. So if you want to check it out, you can check it out. It's still available free. You can check your organization maturity. It's at tc.africa, tcmm.africa. So through that link, you can check your gaps so that you can improve on your cyber maturity and kind of measures to bridge the gaps. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jimson. So another interesting finding, the relation of cybersecurity maturity with the GDP. Who has Shannon? Would you like to comment on this? A quick one, perhaps.
Yes. Very, very quick. We have seen, especially during the COVID pandemic in the Caribbean, when governments started to use more their portals to communicate with the community, that also the cyber criminals, or the criminals, let me call like them, decided, okay, this is an opportunity for us as well. So while we're trying to address connectivity, try to get more people connected, we need to be aware that that criminals also will use this mean to contact, let's say, potential victims. And it's very important to look at a few areas when we talk about cybersecurity. Just the domain names, you can have ways how to protect them. Okay, we don't have time to go in depth right now, but it's a very important topic that we need to focus on, because criminals also are using these very important tools, which is the internet, to contact their victims. Thank you.
With this, thank you, Shannon. With this, I'd like to move to our segment number 2, which is policy frameworks and regulatory measures. The purpose of this segment is to evaluate the current policies for effectiveness, regulatory balance between innovation, affordability, and privacy, and the government's role in driving connectivity and inclusion, such as gender. I'll go back to Mahesh. Mahesh, what specific policy reforms in India or South Asia could most effectively enhance connectivity in rural, in underserved areas?
Well, picking up from what Shannon in particular and Jimson have mentioned, but also from what I was saying, a key regulatory shift in focus that is required is what I would call, that is to look at different parts of the lack of connectivity puzzle. Now, clearly, there are wireless technologies, terrestrial mobile that we are all familiar with, has been a godsend for most countries, particularly developing countries. They have managed to expand in telephone as well as internet access in a very, very speedy way. However, there are gaps. For example, the same cellular technologies are not particularly suitable in remote areas. They're extremely expensive to use in those areas. Similarly, there are other technologies which are actually more appropriate, but for sadly, I think for most of the regulatory regimes that I've studied are focused on the aggregate connectivity. I think they're missing the point that certain very, very important disadvantaged areas and populations are getting caught in the middle. So, for example, we do need focus on technologies like satellites for remote areas. We also need to make sure that other, for instance, most of the telecom sector everywhere in this region is led by telcos. And telcos have their strengths, which in that they have managed to connect countries, but they also have their own commercial imperatives. So I think we have to recognize that some of the less attractive commercial usage will need other players, will need other technologies. And that is something which the regulators need to open their eyes to in a way and focus on and to enable that environment. I'll stop here, but we'll take it up.
Thank you, Mahesh. Technologies are changing, they're advancing. The regulator needs to be, they should adopt the change. They should be more flexible. That's, I think, a key message that
people are falling between the cracks and they need to be addressed.
Right. So, in how they could be protected. These are some of the key issues. Mahesh, thank you very much. Jimson, how has Nigeria or Africa or similar countries in Africa or other places that you've been working in have managed to balance between fostering innovation and ensuring affordability in the digital services? Earlier you spoke about the relation of connectivity with digital services. You talked about the SIM card registration perhaps enhancing connectivity in Africa. What do you say about this?
Thank you very much again for that brilliant question. Let's first understand the global level, good frameworks. Look at recently the Global Digital Compact, Path for the Future, with 5 objectives: bridging, digital divides, making everybody to have the benefit of digital economy, human rights, talking about data governance, talking about AI management for peace, for progress. So at the global level, regional level in Africa, we have a number of frameworks like Malabo Convention, like the African Union, data, and many frameworks to guide us. But the key challenge is in the countries, it's inside the countries. And in Nigeria, for example, we have made a lot of progress because it got to a point, the government listened to all the stakeholders. So have a multi-stakeholder engagement framework. They listen to the private sector, the civil society, the academic, and the technical communities. We all came into a roundtable. The president called where we have issues so that we can resolve amicably. And through that collaboration, we're able to resolve many bottlenecks. For example, the management of .ng. There was crisis over that, but the government, the president called all the stakeholders, resolve it. So very important, we need that multi-stakeholder engagement at the local level so that we can find solution. As I mentioned earlier, the issue of management of Universal Service Provision Fund is a major challenge across Africa. Many collect it, and in the session yesterday, they were talking about mismanagement or corruption. And then the way to that is digitalization. When you digitalize processes, you can deliver services to the citizens cheaply and affordably. And of course, when we allow citizens to have a stake, the telco, the regulators have a forum whereby they meet with all citizens, quarterly. They have a meeting with all citizens. So it's a calling. That calling, and here telco, they take action. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jameson. So with digitalization, the people will be part of the development process. Citizens will have a say, and this could also address the issues related to corruption, perhaps. Muhammad Sharif, what were the successful policy and regulatory strategies in Maldives that help with the connectivity?
Thank you. I think if we actually draw some lessons from where Maldives has been and where it's going, for example, having achieved over 85% internet penetration and 50% 5G penetration, I definitely would say overall the regulatory framework or the regulatory regime has to have two key features. One is it's got to be liberal. Two, it's going to be collaborative. And this is the challenge. How can you have a regulatory environment where the regulator, the service providers, and the policymaker, minimum these three players, can come together and work on a consensus based policy environment and develop aligned strategies? So the national policies, the regulators' strategic guidance and protections of the customers align with how the service providers want to invest in that market. Ultimately, everybody wants to protect the market integrity, because if there's no market, there is no incentive for private sector investment in a country where hundreds of kilometers of domestic submarine cables now connect hundreds of islands. This has been the key. Plus, how do you bring in international ISPs like Starlink? Again, because we have a collaborative environment where service providers and the regulator and the government spend a lot of time. And now, the final point, the national IGF, the fourth stakeholder, need to come together. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharif. So the need for policymaker, regulator, and operator to work together. But there is a fourth segment that you've mentioned is the community, or let's call it the consumer, which was mentioned before, so they can work together to develop and enhance the policy and regulatory environment. Thank you very much, Sharif. Um, how can governments in developing countries integrate capacity building initiatives into the regulatory frameworks to drive digital inclusion?
You want me to take that, Omar?
Yes, please.
Hi, I guess I'm keeping with the capacity building theme. So I guess a few suggestions. For example, incorporating capacity building into national ICT policies. For example, developing national digital skills agendas, setting targets, mandating digital skills training programs. At the same time, requiring telecom companies and internet service providers to support training initiatives as part of their licensing agreements. Another example is to establish digital inclusion funds, where a percentage of revenues from telecom operators or spectrum auctions is allocated to fund digital skills, skill training, and inclusion programs. Then there's another big basket of strategies related to public-private partnerships. For example, collaborations with industry leaders. I'm not sure the word is mandating, but encouraging partnerships with tech companies to develop training programs tailored to local needs, such as Open RAN deployment or 5G infrastructure management And that's part of the work that's being done by the Asia Open Run Academy in the Philippines. Another maybe possible area for discussion for regulatory discussion is providing tax breaks or other incentives for companies in upskilling local talent in digital technologies. And of course, in some countries, they already have corporate social responsibility, leveraging that to sponsor digital literacy and advanced IT training programs. What I find in the Philippines is a lot of corporate social responsibility. They prefer to do food drops and so on. So like it's trying to convince people that digital literacy is just as important than food in the stomach, just as important. Another one is regulating for workforce development in emerging technologies. That includes creating training standards for new technologies, like establishing guidelines for capacity building in critical emerging fields like 5G, Open RAN, cybersecurity that was mentioned, and it should be tied to global standards like 3GPP or an alliance. And I'll give one more example in terms of certification and licensing requirements, including digital skills certifications as prerequisites for employment in regulated sectors such as telecommunications or IT.
Thank you very much, Maria. Some very insightful discussions. I particularly like the idea of digital inclusion fund. Most of the countries have a universal fund. Perhaps a portion of this universal fund could be allocated to digital inclusion. And tech companies and telcos also investing in capacity building, because without digital literacy, perhaps it would be really difficult for people to connect. The first thing is the connectivity, and second is how that connectivity could be meaningful, in how it can become meaningful is for the people, the users, to understand how they can better utilize the internet and technologies. Shannon, what lessons from global best practices in regulatory framework could be applied to promote a market-driven connectivity?
Yes, I think first of all, it's very important for us not to just to replicate everything that we're seeing, let's say, going on globally, because as I did mention, as small island development states, we are different. You know, we have some very unique challenges that maybe those big countries don't have. For example, we are vulnerable to natural disasters. We have small and close economies. We have lack of capacity. We have higher import and export costs, and we have limited resources. But it's still important that we look what is happening globally. But it's what I'm trying to say is that we cannot just replicate them one to one to our local situation, because that would not work. What is very important, one of the measures that we are focusing on that is also happening globally is, for example, passive infrastructure sharing, because then we would like to reduce the cost for telecoms operators. If they can share the towers and mast sites and buildings, you know, this can reduce the cost. We haven't seen much development happening with respect to active infrastructure sharing. There are some, let's say, discussions ongoing, but we haven't seen them really in real life happening. One of the also other developments that we are seeing in the Caribbean is what we call data center and cloud services. We do have one what we call tier 4 data center in the Caribbean. So that's the highest level of the data center that we can reach. And there is another one being built right now in Trinidad and Tobago as well. So this is one of the developments that we are seeing. One of the other challenges that we are seeing and we are trying to address is data sovereignty. Some countries if you look at at how the infrastructures in the Caribbean are developed, most or all the traffic has to go through the US. So you may have some concerns from government saying, okay, we would like to see an alternative route and not all traffic going through the US. And right now you have through it's called the Ella Link from Europe, from Portugal to Brazil, and they're trying also to get a link to the Caribbean on that. In addition to that, there is also um, another cable system coming from, let's say, from Europe going to Martinique, and then from there they would like to reach the Caribbean as well. So what we're trying to do is to look for alternative routes, and this is also one of the global, as you did mention, global best practices that we have seen. One other challenge that we are seeing is collaboration among operators. And here is, for example, where my own organization, the Caribbean Telecommunication Union, is focusing a lot on, especially with respect to spectrum sharing and coordination. When we talk about the Caribbean, we do have two ITU regions in the Caribbean. We have the Region 2, which is the Americas, but we also have, based on constitutional developments, for example, Martinique, Guadeloupe, they are part of Europe. They are part of the ITU Region 1. So we need to coordinate, especially when it comes to spectrum, to avoid interferences and these kind of things. So these are basically global developments that we are seeing, and we are trying to use those developments that we think can give us an added value in our region. But as I did mention, it's not just to replicate one-to-one, because some of these global developments would not work given that we are small island development states. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. So the very important issues you've raised. Two of them were very interesting for me. Number one, the passive infrastructure discussion. In Afghanistan, per my experience, Mr. Bunyad is here, who's running an ISP in Afghanistan. 80% of the cost of fiber extension would go to the digging and laying, the passive infrastructure. So if you kind of deduct that, it's going to be 20% left. And I think many investors would be interested, to invest that. So the government needs to support the passive infrastructure first, so that would make it easy and attractive for the investor to work on the active infrastructure. And the second issue you've raised was about the collaboration between the operators. Now, this is a very interesting topic. And in some countries, it might be against the, the regulatory, measures or policy for the operators to collaborate with each other. But that's an interesting discussion. Perhaps we can dig deeper into it in our future discussions. So with that, I'd like to go back to Shahryar. From your perspective, Shahryar, working with different policymakers, with the governments across member states, what policy frameworks or financing strategies have proven most effective for attracting investment in digital infrastructure?
Thank you very much. I guess it's a very important question to address, and just to let you know that the Islamic Development Bank has been in operation for over 49 years, and next year we'll be celebrating our 50th anniversary. So we have a lot of experience in different countries, and we've often heard about the challenges, the local dynamics. So one fit solution is not for all. What we have done is more recently, traditionally we've been financing digital public infrastructure, And more recently, what we have come up with last year, in Riyadh, we launched our digital inclusion strategy 2024-2027. And as part of this strategy, what we have done is we have come up with a program called Digital Inclusion Strategic Partnership Program. And I'll specifically share a couple of examples that we have done out of this program. But before that, I would like to maybe probably address that what is the guiding principle of what we are trying to do with our new strategy. So what is the core of our strategy is that we would like to make sure that we provide meaningful connectivity in a safe environment, making sure what we are addressing is availability, accessibility, and affordability. So these are the three key aspects that we target whenever we do, and we want to make sure that we have the right capacity once the service is available, so that we make the best use of the services or the infrastructure that we have got out of the project and intervention that we finance. Now, coming back to the examples, so I'll share a couple of examples, like starting with what we are doing with ITU. We are helping developing smart villages in Pakistan. So what we are doing is we are providing meaningful connectivity in smart villages, where we are connecting local schools for girls with teachers sitting in the city, teaching subjects which were not available in the villages before. And on top of that, providing internet connectivity to a nearby local health facility, where a doctor sitting in the city is basically doing online consultations with a trained nurse in the local village through this program. So what we are doing is we are now replicating in other villages as well. So this is one example that we are doing in partnership with ITU. In terms of capacity building, what we've done with ITU recently, just I was mentioning, 3 weeks ago, we were in Nigeria. We did a digital regulation training in partnership with ITU. It was a 5-day training program for the policy makers and regulators from the African region. So we had like 16 countries represented in those program. So the government of Saudi Arabia, FCDO from UK, ITU, and Islamic Development Bank basically co-organized this digital regulation capacity building program for African policymakers. Last but not least, one of the examples that we are currently working with UNDP is on harnessing artificial intelligence for inclusive village development. So what is this initiative? What we are doing is with the Ministry of Villages in Indonesia, we are helping them because in any infrastructure planning, they have a local consultation process to gather the requirements, to know the challenges, to know what solutions would best fit in those villages. So we have handpicked three three provinces. We are into 100 villages and working with UNDP to basically use artificial intelligence to collect the data of the requirements for better infrastructure services in the villages across Indonesia, and use this information to do better planning and then ultimately replicate it other villages in Indonesia as well. So the essence of what we are trying to do is we provide connectivity, we provide capacity building, and also last but not least, what we are focusing on is mainstreaming of technology to support other services like smart education, e-agriculture services, also in the smart education, telemedicine health services as well, on top of facilitating energy, transport, urban, smart cities, water, all these aspects of different established development sectors. We are promoting use of technology in these just for the sake of bringing an efficiency, transparency, and overall digitalization process that we have addressed in the movement.
Thank you very much, Shahriar. With this, we are concluding our segment 2 and moving to our third and last segment. But before we do that, there was a question. You had your hand raised in the other segment, at the end of the other segment. Do you still have the question, or is it addressed? Okay. So please keep it short, and then I'll just need one of our panel speakers to respond to this, so that we have sufficient time for the next one.
Can you hear me? Okay. Is Dr. Naza Nicholas Kirama from Tanzania. Make an intervention. I just wanted to make an intervention as part of the of my work to connect the unconnected in Tanzania. And what we've been able to manage in Tanzania is working on the the low hanging fruits in terms of in rural areas. Uh, it's okay. Yeah, like this. Okay, I'm learning to use microphone. Okay, the idea is while we continue to debate on the policies and the actions that we need to actually take in our space, we also need to continue to use the the available infrastructure to be able to connect schools and communities. For example, in Tanzania, we have been able to connect about 10 schools using the fiber network, and also using the combination of microwave that is available in the villages, by using a simple model of communities, coming together to ensure that they pull their resources together in the form of community networks to connect communities as well as the schools. So I think as we continue to debate on the right kind of policies and infrastructure that is needed to connect, we also have to take the advantage of the hanging fruits to connect schools, especially because the schools is where we are defining the future of digital Asia or digital Africa or digital whatever America, because that is where the kids are, and they need to be connected to digital opportunities online, because we are not just connecting communities and schools for the sake of connecting, but we are connecting them to the resources that can help them even solve the SDG number 1 to get people out of poverty. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that was a good comment and perhaps a good start to last segment, which is about innovative technologies and partnerships. Mahesh, let's start with you again. You're the digital leader. You work with the regulatory authorities in India. You've been consulting in advising the governments to enhance connectivity. So, in your view, what innovative technologies and infrastructure solutions have been most effective in improving internet access in remote areas?
Well, yeah, I would say that. Sure. Huh? I too am learning to use the mic. So, well, join the club. Okay. So, I think in a way, the answer to your question, Omar, is that we have seen very limited innovation. I think what we have seen is a huge success of terrestrial mobile services, which the operators, particularly telcos, have innovated in many different ways. For example, the whole question of prepaid, and in India you have something called micro prepaid, where you could actually get a recharge of something like 5 rupees, which is not even 10 cents, right? And that kind of innovation has really worked quite well. But I think there is another kind of innovation which hasn't worked. For example, our approach to Wi-Fi hotspots has not worked, and our approach to USF has not worked. And the main reason for that is that the telcos themselves are a huge interest in this area, and if their incentives are not aligned, they don't really work very well with these things. So we have found very little attention to actually getting the right kind of balance between the stakeholders in trying to come up with some agreed approach. And I think the regulators need to work more carefully on that. There's no shortage of innovative models. For example, one of the things that we in India lack is the freedom to use alternate business models. For example, in Indian scheme of things, you cannot bundle a handset with your service, which actually has been hugely beneficial to a lot of people who have affordability problems. But our regulatory regime, if you like, or our licensing regime has an approach which actually disallows that. So there are many things like that which actually, same thing, we do not necessarily encourage anybody with a solution for a, let's say, a particular community or a small sub-region, because our licensing regime requires licenses at a certain scale, at a certain geographic size. And given what we are talking about today, we are talking about marginalized people, populations, regions which need to be specifically focused on. I think the licensing regime, which actually evolved at a time when there was exactly one operator and one service in most countries, namely, the government was the main operator and there was only one telephony, which was the only service. So now, given what the whole internet space, the way it has evolved, our regulatory regimes are just struggling to keep up. And I think they have not managed to liberalize the entry into this market sufficiently so that people have the freedom to try new innovative solutions. And regulators also, I think, need to innovate in a big way, which again is a separate subject. I'll be happy to discuss it, but it is an issue which they haven't.
Thank you very much. I agree that regulators need to enhance and improve. And licensing regime is very important. I was speaking with Bunyad the other day. We talked about how voice over IP is banned in Afghanistan. It's nowhere in the law, nowhere in the policy that it's banned. But in the licenses of ISPs, it's written that you can offer voice over IP. So that was surprising. I was in a session with Jun Morai where he was speaking, I think, remotely. And he was talking about the definition of coverage. He said, and when we say coverage, it's the population covered. It's not the land covered. But the future, not only internet for people, but internet of things as well. We're talking about and all these technologies that would need connectivity. So it means that we have to work on enhancing some of, enhancing our understanding of some of these concepts. I'd like to come to Jimson. What do you think? How can technologies such as satellite, it's not a new thing, can be scaled to reach of regions?
Thank you again for that question. Starlink has demonstrated that you can really use, satellite technology profitably and effectively. And that brings us to find out what happened to country-launched satellites. I think we need to ask a lot of questions about that. There are a number of countries that have satellites up there for internet, but we don't see benefits, as much benefits. So perhaps they might need to bring about competition, open it up, okay? We recommend there should be openness, liberalization, let there be more competition. And with that, there'll be more innovation. Talking about other technologies, if I may, there is TV white spaces. TV white spaces can help even in the widespread island countries. TV white spaces can be utilized. But we have seen that some telco don't like that idea because of interest. And then also, we must not forget about IPv6. Because when you talk about meaningful connectivity, IPv6 will guarantee meaningful connectivity and even security. And that's where regulators, those that are in the room, need to take transition from IPv4 to IPv6 seriously. Because there are a lot of features, there are a lot of benefits in terms of faster connectivity, speed, bandwidth that we can derive from that. And lastly, services. Services, government need to demand services through digitalization and then outsourcing. That will help a lot, outsourcing. to other SMEs, because I'm in private sector and I've been a beneficiary, my company has been beneficiary to outsourcing of government activities. So they need to outsource, partner with the private sector the more, so that we can get deeper, into providing meaningful connectivity for everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jameson. We'll ask our other speakers, but let's make it keep it short because we also, I think, how much time do we have? 20 minutes left total. In total, okay. So if we can keep it at 1 or 1.5 minutes, so that we can have some time for our audiences to speak. Shahriar, you spoke about the partnerships for development. What are good examples that could help address the challenges we have been discussing?
I think thank you very much for this question. I've probably shared some of the examples that we are already working with some of the regional organizations, UN agencies, multilateral development banks in order to address. But I think the core of what we have seen as best practice is the country itself, which needs to understand what they want and where they are and how they would like, where would like to proceed, like from A to B. If they understand, and only then external partners could help and assist. If the understanding is not there, if the capacity is not there, then it becomes a huge challenge when external partners come in to facilitate and help the government bridge the digital divide with the essence of leaving no one behind. What we need to understand is if we can collectively work and complement each other's strengths, that if a partner like UNDP comes with the technical expertise and a financial institution like the Islamic Development Bank comes in to provide the finances needed to address a given challenge, that's how we complement with the technical and financial resources, because both are extremely important in order to address any challenge in this current phase. And I think we are now seeing the role of digital cooperation organization in Saudi Arabia coming in to encourage collaboration with different partners, donors, institutions, banks, UN agencies, and regional organizations that come up together to address a given challenge. And of course, we are also part of that ecosystem and happy to contribute as a multilateral development organization.
Thank you very much. Sharif, what are some good examples of public-private partnerships that contributed to enhancing connectivity?
Well, let me just take one example, a controversial example from the Maldives. I would take the example of our incumbent, one of the biggest, we've got two big telecom companies, ISPs in the Maldives. We've got 4 ISPs, but our oldest telecom service provider started as a partnership between Cable and Wireless UK and the government of Maldives, right? And over the years, it's transformed itself into a public limited company. Now the government has a smaller share, the public have shares, and Batelco, Bahrain Telecom, has the majority shares, right? We've gone from connecting the islands to becoming a co-owner of CMV6, one of the most advanced submarine cable systems that is being currently laid. So as a small country of a few 100,000 people, becoming a co-owner of one of the most advanced cable systems, ensuring connectivity to Maldives, this is, I think, a perfect example of how government, the citizens, the public, as well as international partners can work together to take the country to a new level. Thank you. With that, I would like to take leave because I have another session starting in the plenary. So with your permission, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And me too.
Thank you.
Me
Okay.
too.
Thank you for being with us. With this, I will go to Maria. You talked about the. Thank you very much. You talked about Open RAN in similar projects. How do you see, like, what are the technology trends that could help with enhancing connectivity as well as the affordability across the developing world.
Thank you for that. I guess I'll start with Open Run. What is Open Run? It's RAN is the radio access network. So what Open Run does is it decouples hardware and software in telecom networks. It enables interoperability between components from different vendors, thus reducing costs and fosters innovation. Sadly, all of the examples right now are mostly in developing countries, like the US, some countries in Europe, Indonesia to some extent. There are benefits for developing economies for going Open Run, and that enables local vendors to participate in the telecom supply chain, which would boost local economies, supports scalability for rural and underserved regions, and encourages regional talent development in telecoms and software engineering. A related example would be, excuse me, community networks and shared spectrum. Community networks, community-owned networks, they enable small-scale, low-cost deployments in rural areas. It does require sharing of spectrum, and it requires something like the citizens broadband radio service to optimize spectrum usage. That CBRS is not yet practiced in the Philippines, another sad story, but something for consideration, for policy and regulatory consideration. It is, CBRS is quite used in the US in addition to doing innovation zones. So community networks and shared spectrum, they empower local communities to deploy and manage their own networks, which of course requires then capacity building. It does reduce dependency on large telecom operators, which are, I mean, they're there for their return on investments. And then shared spectrum lowers entry barriers for small scale providers, enhancing affordability. And however, uh, getting the spectrum allocation to benefit community networks is kind of a big challenge and a big headache. I think I want to maybe two more examples. AI, somebody's already mentioned it, for network optimization. And then let's not forget energy efficient technologies like solar powered base stations, low power Internet of Things devices, and energy efficient network components to reduce costs and environmental impact. So I guess the challenge for us is like how we can leverage these trends, these technology trends, and align them with policy, infrastructure development, and capacity building efforts.
Thank you, Maria. Sheldon, in your view, how regional collaboration initiatives could be strengthened to improve connectivity across the Caribbean in other regions that are still offline?
Yes, I'll focus, of course, on the Caribbean. And given the time constraint, I will just focus on two areas. So we see, for example, leveraging regional organizations that we have in the Caribbean. For example, CARICOM is one of the, you can compare it a bit with European Union, more or less the same idea behind it. So it's called CARICOM. And we also have the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, at which I am affiliated with. And in addition to those, you have also another organization called CANTO. CANTO stands for Caribbean Association of National Telecommunications Operators. So these three organizations, when it comes to telecoms developments, they are key because each one of them, they have specific roles to play but together they can enhance, let's say, collaboration in the wider Caribbean. So these three organizations have been working together, but in one way or the other, still we need to enhance that collaboration. One other topic is what I would call disaster resilience. As you know, the Caribbean is vulnerable to natural disasters. So here is also where we have been working with international and other global organizations that can help us to address and to raise awareness on the need to build resilient internet and telecommunications infrastructures. If you look when disasters strike in the Caribbean, and when we look back at let's say our telecoms infrastructures, most of the times we have been identifying some key challenges. If you look, for example, at the towers that have been used, or antennas, sometimes if you can expect a hurricane category number 5 and you see what they have been using, it's like calling, asking for trouble, so we need to continue to raise awareness in that regard, and to help all these telecoms operators and others, and also working with government to ensure that we have resilient, let's say, telecoms and internet infrastructure in place. So these are two areas, in addition to others, that we have been collaborating in the region to ensure that we have meaningful and resilient telecoms and internet services provisioning.
Thank you, Shalon. So with this, I'd like to open the floor for questions from the audiences. You've been here listening to us. Now I'd like to, involve you in the discussion. So please feel free to raise your hands if you have questions or comments, but please keep them short, and concise, so that we can take as many. So there are 3 hands raised. The lady in the back, and okay, please go ahead. Introduce yourself, name, affiliation, and then your question.
Okay, thank you very much. I am Mirwais Khan, working with a leading telecom company in Afghanistan, and also part of technical community of Afghanistan. My question is for Mr. Shahryar. Considering as you shared your insights about your projects in different parts of the world, considering the challenges Afghanistan is facing as a landlocked and least connected country, does ADB has any future plan or program to support the connectivity of Afghanistan?
Thank you. So let's take all the questions, and then let's take the other questions, and then we can, yes. Go.
Hi,
Then-
my name. Hear me? Can you
Yes,
hear me
now.
now?
Yeah.
So my name is Elisa from Vietnam but based in Germany, and I'd like to ask questions to several speakers, and I would love you to elaborate on your country's situations. Maria, you talk about the situation.
I can't hear you.
It's
hello,
it's
yeah.
working. It's working, but just keep it closer. Keep it
Okay.
close. Yeah.
You talk about digital inclusion fund, and you talk about various infrastructure challenges facing the Filipinos. However, in the context of the Philippines, there are only a few internet companies, and the geography of the Philippines makes it very difficult to receive internet, a lot of islands. So what can the civil society actors can do to counter these challenges? I have one question to the speaker from Pakistan. In the context of Pakistan, the government plays an active role in slowing down the internet. So these top-down challenge, how can the civil society actors challenge this, counter this top-down crackdown on the internet? And I also have the question to the moderator from Afghanistan. Can you tell us about how the conflict in Afghanistan impacts the internet And how can you describe the internet resilience in your country?
Thank you very much. There was okay. Let's go to there first, and then no, the last one first. And you have a question as well. Okay, so then.
So, thank you for this really interesting and a very comprehensive discussion, because it covers major parts of the world where connectivity is an important part. My question is to Shahryar. You talked about a village, the digital village that you're working on. Usually, there also is another digital village, probably ITU is working on in Pakistan. Are you targeting areas of true access gap when you're selecting areas for these digital villages? Because our experience has been that they just try to do it in an area near Islamabad, or where their connectivity issues are not really a big issue. So because the private sector doesn't really go into areas of true access gap, so can we have development partners work on those areas? And then if yes, what kind of challenges do you think you'll encounter?
Thank you. Thank you so much for this insightful conversation. I'm a student from Nanjing Youth Development Center, and I would really like to learn more about how the government of each of your countries adjust policies on digitalization to account for those marginalized groups, to make sure that innovation can cover everyone.
Okay. Any more questions? I think that's okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. Am I audible? Yeah. I like the discussion. I really enjoyed the example of the schools connectivity, the examples of connectivity in India, how much people are connected, the digital inclusion fund Maria mentioned. So all are like very interconnected, and one of the interconnected challenges is the besides it is the affordability. So I have read like sometimes these kind of solutions are temporary. For example, if the project which is funded to the activities finished, so what happens? So like I have read in Afghanistan, we have the same issue of the affordability. Sometimes in some areas there are internet connectivity there. The service providers are providing the services, but people are not able to, I mean, they are not affording it. So do you have any comments or any suggestions, like Mahesh knows about the revolution the Geo brought in India? So is there any other solutions where governments or any international organization can help support to provide such permanent solution to the connectivity? Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much. I think all of you have questions, but I heard a few of them were addressed to you. So if you can go first, Shahryar, and then we can, ask others.
Sure. I'll try to address some of the questions that were addressed to me. Maybe first of all, just wanted to clarify that although I'm originally from Pakistan, but I'm representing the Islam Development Bank here. So of course I will not be commenting on the government perspective of Pakistan. Probably starting with the question that was raised. So the Islam Development Bank works mainly with the governments, and we operate in a model that we try to assist the government needs. So as long as the government of Afghanistan officially writes through the official channel, through the Islamic Development Bank, then we are here to address. Because what we need to make sure that we are targeting a problem which is understood and owned and prioritized by the government. So as long as these three aspects are there, only then we respond. We don't come up with our own set of agenda to address any, if we believe that you should be doing, in Afghanistan, we should be doing that, in Pakistan, we should be doing that. No. The idea is that the government reaches out to us, sharing a problem and needing a solution for a sustainable development, right? And then we assess based on our technical due diligence and our financial due diligence, legal due diligence, and then we try to assess the country. This is one aspect. So we are actually in Afghanistan, we are currently working with UN agencies, because they are actively engaged there, and you know the challenges that we have in terms of accessing places to access projects, sites, and everything. So we are working with UN implementation partner, like other fragile countries that we operate in, that are in conflict zones, in war situations. So there are certain number of countries, unfortunately, in today's world, that we do not directly work, but we work through agencies like UN agencies. This is so probably I've addressed the question. I think as we understand that even this forum is about governance, right? So I think every country has their own set of rules and regulations to govern the internet. And probably whatever actions any government, including government of Pakistan, would take is to, in order to make sure that there are no social unrest. There, people are following the rules and regulations set by the government, set by the parliament of that particular country, in order to make sure that if they, to avoid any casualties, any social unrest. So whatever they need to do in order to address a bigger nation like Pakistan, they would take all those measures. So I think probably have addressed at least that aspect. And coming back to the question that was raised about the smart village, so you're absolutely spot on. Uh, the program is by ITU, so we are not directly involved. The program is basically prioritized by the government of Pakistan, which is the Ministry of IT and Telecom, working with the ITU. They've already implemented one phase. The second phase, we assess based on an eligibility criteria, that okay, what are the set of initial assumptions that should be there, because we have very limited resources. So we can do only limited things with the limited technical and financial resources, which are, where certain assumptions are there, that okay, if they have a paved road, they have connectivity in terms of transportation. If you're not able to reach to that place, how are we able to provide those services? So I think these are certain eligibility criteria that we, based on that, we shortlist certain villages, and the government writes to us. So it's not, we are not selecting. So it's the government writes to us that we would like your assistance in order to address these challenges in these gaps. Whether would you like to assist or not? So probably,
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
There was, I think, our time is up, but is there? We'll close it in a few minutes. There was one question for Maria related to the islands being disconnected and distributed, and how what role the civil society can play. And the second question, the last one, was I think you addressed most of the question, and her question was about how the policy can help to connect the marginalized communities. Yeah, so that would be a question for perhaps Mahesh could address that, and Shannon can share his opinion. Maria, then I will come back to Mahesh then. Please
Okay,
keep
let
it
me
brief. We're done. I think we're finished with the time. Please go ahead.
Yes, let me give it a try. So, in the Philippines, there is a government program called Free Internet Wi-Fi Connectivity in Public Places. Then some of that program also goes to connectivity concerns for state universities and colleges. So that's sort of one way of getting connectivity down to the communities. So there's that. There's the Asia Open Run Academy. It is an NGO. And the point of the academy is actually to, it's an alliance. It's to bring together government, academics, and industry, pulling together in terms of this open run solutions. A big problem for the open run, of course, as I've mentioned earlier, is the radio spectrum allocation. By definition, when you say RAN, it means access to radio spectrum. And yes, there are 7,000 islands in the Philippines. It's difficult to connect all those islands. So we're talking also about us in the smart village, the idea of smart islands. And of course, the connectivity is very uneven, where you have things like smart homes in places like Metro Manila, And then, of course, in the geographically isolated, disadvantaged areas, there is no connectivity. One thing that we're trying to, the Asia Open RAN Academy is trying to do is also to encourage private enterprise networks, so away from the big telcos that kind of take forever to turn them around in terms of the technology. Um, so things like, so if you have a province, for example, where they do mining, so you can start thinking about smart mining and how you can have connectivity for the miners who are mining, and then at the same time share that connectivity with the rest of the community. Another example, of course, is smart hospitals. Um, and it's the smart hospital is trying to ride on the internet Wi-Fi connectivity in public places. So trying to get the various actors kind of to work together instead of separately, because they have separate targets, separate deliverables, separate funding, is an excellent challenge. And I would like to continue this conversation with a lot of you in terms of like, how can we do this together in the Philippines? Yes, but Indo-Pacific and in places where there are islands and geographically isolated development areas.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you very much. So just to finalize before they kick us out, 1 minute, Mahesh. How can policy address the marginalized groups, the issues related to them?
Yeah, I think two things are, I'd make two simple points. One is, of course, that as far as service provision is concerned, the private sector has done a fairly reasonable job. I think prices across the South Asian region, I'm not sure about all, but have fallen quite considerably. India certainly brags about being one of the cheapest markets, both for data as well as voice. However, there are two areas where policymakers and regulators need to work. One is actually access, which is the regions and populations that are currently not reached, and where the private operators do not have the commercial incentive to deal with it. And that is where the USF type of funds come into, and they need a great amount of creativity. And amongst the creative bits that they require is also attention, in my view, to smartphones. Because while the service is cheap, the physical device is not. And the price of smartphones is actually increasing quite significantly, while the price of services, you mentioned, Gayur, the case of Jio, or Reliance Jio, which actually crashed the prices and which everybody else has had to follow. And so the price of services has, one way or the other, fallen, but the price of smartphones has not. And also the cost of connecting those who are not connected hasn't fallen. And for that, governments as well as regulators would need to work very creatively with tools such as the USF and various others to deal with it.
Thank you very much, Mahesh. Just to quickly answer your question, the colleague from Vietnam. I am from Afghanistan, but it's been a few years I'm not living there, so I don't have a full understanding of what's happening now. But from my participation at the Afghanistan IGF in the similar local events that are happening, still happening online, it was said, one of the experts said that people were concerned with the fall of the government in Taliban takeover that internet will be shut down in Afghanistan. But due to the fact that Afghanistan internet is uniquely designed, it was hard to be shut down. So it doesn't have one switch from where you can shut it down. It's so distributed and so unique that it makes it difficult for anybody to shut it down. So later on, the colleagues from Afghanistan, you could perhaps discuss more with them to learn more about the realities on the ground. So just to conclude this session, I think that the session is starting. So key takeaways or the highlights. Bridging the connectivity gap. Addressing infrastructure, affordability, and digital literacy challenges is critical for connecting the offline population. That's one. Number two, policy and collaboration matters. Effective policies, regional cooperation, and public-private partnerships drive meaningful progress towards universal internet access. Number three, technology innovation drive inclusion. Technologies like AI, satellite, wireless, innovative financing models provide scalable solutions for digital inclusion. Now, what needs to be done in order to achieve these? Promote adaptive policies and investment. So this is a shared responsibility of all of us to work on. So we need to encourage the governments and stakeholders to prioritize flexible policies and targeted investment that foster innovation, affordability, and inclusion, as Shahriar said, in underserved regions. And also, we all need to invite public-private partnerships and regional cooperation to resources, share experiences, and implement scalable connectivity solutions. Finally, let's keep this discussion. This should not be, it's a start of a discussion, but it should not be the end of the discussion. So in the future, more post-session collaboration from you. Share your insights with us on policy issues, the recommendations and opportunities that could contribute to the connectivity issues across the region. Thank you very much, Mahesh, Shahriar, Shannon, Maria, and also Jimson, Sharif, and everybody for participating with us. I wish you a wonderful IGF.
Thank you.